Great. Welcome, everybody. It is Thursday evening, and we are in our fourth How I Decided webinar. So thank you for joining us this evening. We've got a great group of speakers with us tonight to talk about bachelors and beyond. We will be hearing from 4 live speakers and two folks from video tonight. So we're looking forward to hearing from all of them. And with that, I will start with Sarah Mowry from Child Serve and Director of Development there. And Sarah, I'm going to show the questions so you have some talking points to go through as you're chatting with us. But thank you for joining us this evening.
Great, thank you, Jamie. I kind of prepared some comments that answered all the questions, but didn't necessarily go in this order. Do you want me to follow the questions more specifically, or is that okay?
No, you can go in whatever order you'd like. So that's totally fine.
Okay, awesome. Well, good evening, everyone, or good day, whenever it is that you're watching this. My name is Sarah Mowry, and as Jamie mentioned, I'm the Director of Development at Child Serve here in Johnston, Iowa, is where we are headquartered. And so as Director of Development, my role is I am a professional fundraiser. So I ask people for money for a job, which to some of you may sound like your worst nightmare, because I've certainly heard people say, oh, I could never do that. But I love it. It's been a great career. It's been very rewarding for me. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I do here at Child Serve, what that actually looks like, and then how I came to be in this role. So as Director of Development, I wear many hats. If you talk to anybody that works for a nonprofit, you know that often we wear lots of different hats. And so that's still the case for me at Child Serve. But some of my main responsibilities are I plan our fundraising events, and we have a couple big ones. We have an annual golf event that we hold in the fall. It's a fun day of golf to help raise money for our children with special healthcare needs. And then secondly, we have our annual bubble ball, which is a very big event. And I'm going to do just a quick little plug about it because it's lots of fun. But it's a typical gala type dinner in a normal year. This year it's virtual, but there is an extra element to it that is a fashion show, and all of the pieces in the fashion show are made out of bubble wrap. So it's lots of fun. You can learn more about it at childserve.org/bubbleball. So what do we do here at Child Serve? I should probably share that as well. We help kids with special healthcare needs to live a great life. We partner with their families to help them live a great life. And special healthcare needs can be a variety of different things. It's developmental delays, it's disabilities, it's brain injuries. We serve kids in mental health and behavioral health diagnoses, among a variety of other things. So we see lots of kids. We serve about 4,700 kids each year. And it's a great organization that I really enjoy being a part of. So in addition to my role in planning events, I also help to grow our annual fundraising program, which is a way for individuals, families, organizations to contribute to Child Serve each year. And then I also help plan our employee campaign, and I write some grants. So how did I get to be in this role here at Child Serve? I'm a University of Iowa graduate, go Hawks, and I was a journalism and communications major at Iowa. I originally thought that what I wanted to be was a journalist, and so that was my major until junior year of college. I became part of our student philanthropy group, which was an ambassador group with the University of Iowa Foundation, which is now University of Iowa Center for Advancement. And really in that group, we acted as ambassadors for the foundation in that we attended some events that they held with their donors so that donors could talk to students, learn what's been happening on campus. And then we also promoted the impact of philanthropy on campus at the University of Iowa. So that was really my first taste of fundraising and a career in fundraising. And then around that same time, the School of Journalism at the University of Iowa released a certificate in fundraising and philanthropy communication, which is more or less a minor in terms of coursework. And I decided that that was something that I wanted to pursue. So in addition to my major in communications and journalism, I also have a certificate in fundraising and philanthropy, which is somewhat rare in the fundraising world to actually have a degree in fundraising, but I think it is starting to become more and more common. So when I finished school, I started working at a nonprofit called Big Brothers Big Sisters of Central Iowa. Many of you have probably heard of Big Brothers Big Sisters. It is a national organization, and it's a smaller nonprofit than Child Serve, and so I really wore a lot of hats there. And I started in more of a marketing and volunteer recruitment role. But I knew what I wanted to eventually do was fundraising. And so in that role, and then the role that followed that, which was at YSS, headquartered in Ames, I started getting more and more fundraising opportunities, and then landed here at ChildServe, which is where I'm at today. So why did I choose fundraising? Why did I want a career in fundraising? I found early on from my days with the Student Philanthropy Group at the University of Iowa that it's really interesting to talk to people who have a passion about your organization, whatever that might be. So I say that that's my favorite part about my job. And when people say, oh, you ask for money, I could never ask for money, I tell them that it's really looking at it differently. And for me, it's an opportunity to talk to people who are passionate about your organization and give them an opportunity to make a difference with that organization. So it's very rewarding, and I get to learn and talk to a lot of very interesting and successful people, which I've really enjoyed. And then the second thing is just, if you're in a fundraising role, you are working for a nonprofit of some kind. And so you know that the work that you're doing is truly making a difference for people who often need it most. So it's been very rewarding in that way as well. Let's see, a little bit about a career in fundraising. In addition to my bachelor's degree from the University of Iowa, I also have a master's from Drake University. It's a master's in communication leadership. It's kind of like a public relations journalism master's degree as well, but another common master's degree in the fundraising world is a master's of public administration. A master's degree is not required to be a fundraiser, but you will often see in leadership level fundraising that many people do have a master's degree. So that's something that if you want to be in a role like mine someday, I would certainly recommend considering it, but not a requirement, especially to get started. I did it after I had been working for a few years, so got started at first. In terms of salary, which I think was one of the questions, I think it very much can range depending on the organization that you work for, the role that you are in. A smaller nonprofit like where I started is going to be likely a lower salary than a health care organization or even higher education like the University of Iowa. So if I were to give a range, I would maybe say something like $40,000 a year to over $100,000 a year. That's a wide range, but there's certainly opportunity for growth in this field. And let's see, necessary skills. I think communication is a big one, which I'm sure the other speakers that are going to talk this evening will say is an important skill. It's really something that you can use in any career field. Written communication is also important. A part of my job is grant writing, and that's all a written request for funds. Let's see, what other skills are necessary? I think being detail oriented, especially with my event planning piece of my job. But just, I think being willing to ask questions, being willing to say you need help on certain things. These are all skills that I think have been helpful for me in my role, but really in any type of career, I think you would find them to be helpful. And let's see, I think the last question that I wanted to make sure that I touched on was in relation to finding a mentor in whatever career field that you would choose. But obviously I can mostly speak to fundraising. And I think what I have found to be valuable is just if I meet somebody at an event or through a project and I could see that I could learn something from them, I have found it to be helpful to just ask them to coffee and ask questions. How did they get to where they were at? What type of advice would they give to someone like me who's maybe early starting out in my career? And I never found that I had this specific, at least not so far in my career, this specific mentor-mentee relationship where I said to someone, "Hey, will you be my mentor?" And they said yes. And then we met every month. It was never any sort of thing like that. And that's my advice, is that it doesn't have to be anything formal. It can just be you getting coffee with someone and asking them to tell you more about their story, how they got to where they were at, and just if you learned a lot from them, ask them again in 3 months to get coffee. Maybe you have a specific question or a challenge that you want to get their advice on. And that's a mentor relationship right there. It's just someone sharing their wisdom with you. So I think that's all of the questions that I remember, or at least that I saw. Anything, Jamie, that I'm missing or that I should be sure to touch upon?
No, that is all excellent information. And it sounds like you have had some really good success in your field too. I'm definitely like, I have not heard of that certificate program, or, like the degree in fundraising. That's brand new to me. And I left nonprofit life just a little bit ago. So that's cool to hear. I guess my question to you would be, what is your favorite thing about your work, and maybe like what has been a challenge in getting to where you are as well?
Definitely. Those are great questions. And I will say on the degree in fundraising, I think that it's rare, but it is starting to become more common. I think more and more schools are getting something like that. So I would encourage all the students that are watching this to look into it if it's something that you might be interested in. Even if you don't want to do a career in fundraising, likely you will be asked to do some kind of fundraising, maybe even in a volunteer capacity at some point in your life. So they're good skills to have regardless of where or how you might use them. But to answer your questions, Jamie, I think that my favorite part of my job is every day looks a little bit different. I get to do lots of different things. Right now, I am all in on planning our bubble ball, which is coming up on May 8th. I think I forgot to mention that earlier, if that's not another plug. But not right now, it's all event planning, but sometimes it's writing a grant, sometimes it's calling someone and meeting them for coffee and talking to them about child serve. And so it's great to have something a little bit different every day, and it keeps things interesting for sure. And also, like I mentioned before, just getting to meet lots of people, and people that are most often genuinely happy to be talking to you, happy to be learning about what's been going on in your organization. So I really enjoy that part of my job. And then I'm sorry, I forgot the other question. What was the other question, Jamie?
Yeah. Are there any like challenges that you've had in getting to where you are? Like, how did you maybe approach some of the transitions that you've had from different places?
Yes, that is a good question. Let's see, challenges that I have faced. Gosh, I'm trying to think of one specific one. I think just because I often wear a lot of different hats, I think a challenge for me over my career has been just learning to prioritize my time, which I think is something that, again, is not specific just to the fundraising world, but I have found it to be something that has been a bit of a learning curve, learning how to prioritize what needs to get done first, especially when your to-do list can seem like it will never end. So if you can figure that out early, how to prioritize your time, then you're set. But I think it's often an ongoing learning.
Yeah, that's a great point, because that's definitely not it's a very personal skill too. So like you have to figure out what works best for you, and that can take a little while to get a good idea of what's best for yourself. I appreciate that. And
Definitely.
fundraising is really like, it's an art. So kudos to you in the work that you're doing. Oh, that's
Thank you.
awesome. Yeah. All right. I'm going to switch over to Donna to talk to us about her career path. And Donna, I'm going to put your name up for a little bit here, but then I will move back to the question slide as well. But welcome, and we're looking forward to hearing from you as well.
So I just wanted to say hello to everybody out there. I'm Donna Phillips. I'm with the Iowa Attorney General's Office, or the Department of Justice, and I'm what's called a community specialist, which basically means I'm a grant manager, and I manage federal and state grants that go to agencies that provide services to victims of crime. And it's one division within the Iowa Attorney General's Office. So there are many different jobs and opportunities in our office, as far as there's attorneys, there's people helping assisting victims. We have people that are assisting consumers. So there are many different kinds of jobs. And just to kind of explain a little bit about myself is I didn't go into this work thinking this is what I'm going to do. When I was fresh out of high school, I knew I wanted to go to college. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So I actually went to college. I went to Truman State University, or Northeast Missouri State University, down in Kirksville, Missouri. And I loved it there. So yay. And when I went there, my degree, I was thinking potentially criminal justice, maybe business. And so I dabbled a little bit in some coursework with that. But I actually have a degree in child development. And I loved working with children. So I just kind of felt myself naturally going towards that and assisting and helping and working with children. So I graduated from Northeast Missouri State University with a Bachelor of Science degree. And because I changed my major 3 times, and then even at one time in my college career, I was undecided. And I think that oftentimes college students or young adults think they have to know what their plan is for the future, and they always have to figure everything out. And my experience is that some people know. Some people wake up and say, I want to be an accountant. I want to be an eye doctor. I want to be an attorney. Or I want to do this job. Like I want to work with fundraising, or I want to work with children. And I think that's fabulous when you know what you want to do and you follow through with that. And that's wonderful when you can do that. But there's a majority of us that really don't know what we wanted to do. And the thing about that I have found in my career is that in my life is that I've had different opportunities and different jobs. And instead of making myself only to stay in one position and try it, what worked for me is trying something different. So I actually graduated with a child development degree. I taught preschool for 3 or 4 years, loved the kids, but felt I needed more challenges. So my other interest has always been criminal justice. And so I just happened to be with a friend who was looking at a school to go to in Colorado for paralegal school. And I actually ended up being the one that went to Denver, Colorado. I went to paralegal school there and got my paralegal certificate. Then I also went into, when I graduated with that, it was not a good opportunity for jobs at that point. So it was hard finding a job. So I did a lot of odd jobs. But I also ended up working for a computer litigation company. And they contracted with the Environmental Protection Agency. So it was all about how to take computer database systems and organize their records and their files so that they could prosecute different kinds of businesses and different things along those lines. So I did that for a while and enjoyed that. And then I had an opportunity to actually work for a domestic violence rape crisis center, as well as a shelter, and work as a court advocate, where I'd actually go to court with victims and help them get emergency protective orders or help them walk through the process of the criminal justice system. And I found out I was very passionate about that. And just so you know, any job that I was in, I always left on good terms. I was very lucky in that regard. But I also came to a point where I needed to do something different. I needed something that more interests me. I felt like I did everything I could in my job opportunity at that point. And so I was willing to move. I've lived in different places across the nation. I've lived in Colorado and Chicago and St. Louis and on the East Coast. Of course, I'm back here in the Midwest because I love the Midwest and that's where I'm from. And but again, I let things take me in different directions and try things out. And I let myself fail. I mean, so like sometimes I would go to a job and be like, oh, I'm not sure this is going to be the job for me, but I stuck through it. I worked with people and I learned skills that actually helped me get the job I have today. So every job in my career and all the education courses I took, I feel gave an aspect of what I do today. So I think, again, your path in life could go into many different directions, and that's okay. I worked for many years, 3 or 4 or 5 years for a domestic violence sexual assault program and a shelter, as I discussed. Then I decided to actually be a paralegal for a while because, of course, working with victims and responding to hospitals and responding to the courthouse can be very intense at times. And so after several years, a few years, I decided that, I'm going to go and be a paralegal. So I worked for a family law firm. And one of the things I always looked at, though, when I worked with people was what business, and any business that I worked for, what did they bring to the community? How did they volunteer? Did they volunteer? Did they encourage that in their staff? And so that kind of evolved over time. And that was just something that I kind of looked at and really appreciated it. I liked being a paralegal, but I really missed helping people in more ways than I was. And so I heard about a job back here in Iowa, and I actually came here, and that's how I started working for the state of Iowa, administering the violence against women, or assisting to administer the violence against women grants. And then now I've been with the AG's office for probably like 19 years in different aspects of that. And so my job administering grants is that we get federal and state money, and there are many rules and regulations that go with it. So we have to comb through those to make sure that we have a clear understanding of what those are. And then we have to actually have agencies apply to us. So we have to have some kind of fair mechanism for them to be able to apply to us and for us to consider funding them. And make sure that it's within the scope of the grants, the scope of the funds, that they have the capability to manage those funds. So some of the agencies we work with are nonprofit domestic violence, nonprofit rape crisis centers, nonprofit shelters. We work with law enforcement. We work with prosecutors. We work with the courts. And then we work for other agencies like substance abuse programs that maybe offer services for victims, or mental health programs that might offer services for victims. Or we also work with culturally specific programs and communities to reach victims as well. So that's kind of what we do. And then when we give the money out, we also make sure to manage to make sure that they do what they're supposed to with the money, so that there's accountability and there's checks and balances. Just to give you an idea, in my division, there are a lot of people with a lot of different degrees in our division. So we have people who have Department of Correction degree, or bachelors with a Department of Corrections, in criminal justice. We have people who have their background in mental health or substance abuse or public administration, or that they have business. We have somebody in our office that has an environmental degree, but fell into working with victims and decided that this is one of the things they were passionate about. People that have their, let me think what else. Well, I mean, again, various degrees within our division. And of course, there's the majority of the Attorney General's office is made up of attorneys who actually prosecute different cases, both criminal, do administrative law, help consumers, and do many other things for the state of Iowa. So that's kind of it in a gist. What we look for when we are interviewing people is we don't always look for somebody that has a specific degree in something. We actually are looking at what that degree has done for them and what kind of work experiences they have, and would their work experience and their knowledge and information from their degree bring something unique to our division that could help us maybe do more outreach or help us build roads with other organizations to help reach more victims across our state. So that's kind of what we look for. Let me think what else. Some of the things I love about my job is I love helping people. I'm very much a helper. I want to help people. But instead of this time, I'm not helping victims directly. I actually am helping the organizations be stronger and to provide best practices on how they're assisting victims and survivors across our state. The majority of our funds are made up of penalties from crime. So crime penalties, and that's how our funds are made up, the majority of them. So it's not an allocation. We do have some some of our state funds are allocated, but a lot of our federal funds are by fines and penalties at the federal level. Let me think what else. Goodness, I just kind of am at a point. Is there questions maybe, Jamie, that I forgot to answer, or something that you want to know, or?
There, no questions from the chat, but just from myself, so this is going back a little bit though. When when you first started your post-secondary path and going into college and changing majors, did that like have any unintended consequences that ended up steering you a different direction? Or how did you decide, a major it wasn't right for you and you needed to find something else?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a great question. So when I went to college, again, I was thinking more criminal justice or potentially business. And so I did have a criminal justice major. I did have a business major at some point and take those courses. And I would say that I enjoyed the courses, but it just still didn't feel like a right fit for me. And then a friend of mine suggested working with children and either going to teaching or child development. So it's really child and family development as well. And I was passionate about that. So that's kind of how I kind of started with that. And then when I was working in that field, it obviously kept my imagination going. So that was really helpful for me, something that I needed that was a little bit more, some freedom with my imagination and what I could do with that. And instead of just specifically paperwork or just specifically like something for the business. The only consequence that I have is because I did have 4 or 5 majors that I did go to an extra year of schooling. So I actually took me 5 years to obtain my bachelor's degree in the field of study that I wanted to. One of the things I also said about doing different careers and different jobs and bringing what those jobs, being pieces of it to my current job, is one of the things that I actually put myself through college as a secretary. And so working as a secretary, working in administrative work, helped me be more organized, which is a huge component of what I do now. So like that job has helped with this. Working with attorneys in a computer litigation company helped me actually in talking with attorneys and prosecutors and understanding the processes in the legal system. Also working on computer database systems. Currently, one of the projects I'm working for in my office is working on a grants management database system and on that project. So my experience with that helped translate to that. Being a paralegal, obviously understanding a little bit more about the criminal justice process and working with victims. And then working with the domestic violence and sexual assault program helped me actually understand when victims are coming to you and what services could look like and maybe should look like and how to be more accessible to victims. So that helps me translate to monitoring programs and doing best practices.
Yeah, that's awesome. And to me, it sounds like, even having to add on a 5th year of education was not a negative thing by any means. It sounds like it kind of helped guide you to where you wanted to be. And then you also got to experience a lot of other factors that have definitely brought you to where you are today.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate it. And Donna, please feel, we don't have any questions in the chat, so you're free to leave, but you're also free to stick around as well.
Thank you.
Get through the rest of ours as speakers. Okay, I'm going to switch over to John Wolf, and let me see. I'm going to get our slide over there. Welcome, John. Here we are. All right. If you welcome this evening, and then if you want to start telling us about your experience, that is appreciated.
Yep. So I'm John Wolf, Supply Management Supervisor with John Deere, currently down in TMA, part of a joint venture. So a little bit about my background is I'm a business management major from Purdue University. And from there, just kind of went into various roles with increasing responsibility at John Deere with an entry-level position into a call center where you're taking phone calls from the John Deere dealer network, and then handling any questions they may have on basically part orders for their machines and for their customers. And then eventually moved down to Louisiana to a supply management buyer position, where I was kind of an individual contributor purchasing handling materials to go towards sugarcane harvesters, the scraper products that we make for the construction and the tractor businesses, and then also a small utility tractor, construction tractor down there. I did that for a couple years and then moved back up to Dubuque. So I'm originally from the Quad Cities, so moving back up to home, where I became a buyer for new products. So setting up new parts for new machines, new programs that we're going into, but basically setting up purchasing for programs going into 2 years of production in 2 years. So kind of learning the supply base and just the overall managing of the suppliers, working with quotes, making sure that their quality is up to speed and meets John Deere specs, and just kind of sourcing products. I did that for about 3 years and then moved down back home to Davenport to be an inventory control supervisor, where we manage the inventory, making sure that inventory is accurate, which is a big challenge in Davenport, and then also supervising a few wage counters to meet some of the accounting and the SEC guidelines that you have to count and properly report your assets, which is in turn inventory. So after about 2 years, I moved to TMA, which is again a little joint venture. So went from large ag or large construction equipment, and now I'm building just transmissions with now I actually have, instead of wage employees, I now have salary employees under me. So kind of moving up the management spectrum and now going into more college educated individuals. So really the major that I had was management at Purdue, with a minor in marketing and a minor in human resources, which I don't really use at all. But I will say I didn't really change it. It really wasn't a choice. I didn't really see anything that I really wanted to do. But I did have a brother that did change majors. He did graduate at just about another semester. But I do think that's something that's an interesting dynamic when it comes to majors. I go back to Purdue once a year to promote John Deere as a Purdue alumni. And what I'm interested is to see how the majors have changed so drastically, especially even in my college. When I went to Purdue, there was only management, and industrial management was your business majors in the business college. Nowadays, they have a supply chain network. They have data analytics that are very, very specific, which in my opinion is very, very challenging, because if you get in there, you probably got to change major if you ended up not liking it. Whereas my management major at the time had a lot of dynamics of human resources, accounting, business, just overall business lingo, which coming out of college was a drastic challenge to get a career, because I'm not specialized into anything. But now looking back and how I use my degree and what I learned in college, I'm glad I had that broad spectrum, just because it allows me to think, like right now I'm in supply management, but I think like an accountant, because everything is dollar signs. It's important to manage a budget and all those aspects. So it'll be interesting to kind of see some of the other, how things change with college and how majors have been becoming more specific. So when I talk to students, it seems like they're a lot more, they know exactly what they do right when they get to college. Whereas I had no idea by the time I was even a senior in college what I wanted to do. So at to how to pursue my career, I honestly don't know anything different. So I grew up in Bettendorf. I went to Pleasant Valley. So the dynamic is you just went to college. I didn't really know that there was opportunities, or didn't think of any other opportunities. The aspect was to go to college. My parents saved a good amount of money and always talked about going to college. So the decision was basically that I didn't know anything different. And then also kind of goes with the career. I have parents both worked at John Deere, again, from the Quad Cities. So the majority of the population work for Deere or know someone that works for Deere. So the decision, I didn't know any difference. So looking back, I'm happy. I love my job now. Going from a little kid that was playing with little machines in the dirt to actually building those same machines is kind of a neat aspect. and then also kind of builds a better family dynamic and having conversations with my family. Whereas when I was a kid, I was just listening to mom and dad talk. Now I can actually join in and they can kind of help me as well. So in my career, what I found is successful is really just open-mindedness. So when it comes to schooling, I think it's kind of an interesting, the question of what kind of schooling is necessary to be successful. I've really seen two difference in my career. I've seen groups that are successful that don't have any schooling, that have experience and have been very, very successful in what they do. The problem that I've seen with that is they don't have an opportunity to truly grow. In my career, it seems to be that a bachelor's degree, or at least a pursuit of a bachelor's degree, is critical to promote or to develop and move into different areas, simply because of the way the hiring process seems to be structured. If you don't have a bachelor's degree, you're often not even making the cut through the automatic system. So I feel like that's a big challenge in my career, not only at John Deere, but I've seen it in other companies as well. That the choice, if you don't have a degree, it's very hard to not only get in the door, but also to move up throughout the ranks. So Deere was my first career choice. Coming out of college, I graduated in 2009, so I didn't have that many options. It was not the first thing I did. My first job out of college was mowing lawns at a cemetery. You did have to the occasional bury someone every once in a while, but also running after the summertime. Then I was a runner for a construction company until I finally got hired on through Deere, and then became a contingent, and then kind of finally got hired on directly for John Deere. So schooling was challenging. I graduated and didn't have truly a big motivation to go to the career fairs. I didn't have like one-on-ones with my counselors to talk about degrees or opportunities outside of college. They were obviously there. I just didn't take the time. And looking as I was coming out of college, the importance that it is to be involved. Again, I talked to some of those students that are in college today, and hearing what they are doing as far as some of the robotics classes that they're being a part of, and some of the extracurricular activities is just mind-boggling. What's not only available, but just what they're doing. I wouldn't have even dreamt of doing any of that when I was in college. So what I've seen is successful highly is the career development that you get while you're in school. Deere specifically offers some internships, but other companies and internships, you seem to have that opportunity as a college graduate or while you're in college to learn from a company for a summer. And you see that a lot, where the successful people tend to have internships. Not only does that make you seem to be successful coming out of college, but also throughout your career. Whereas you've probably learned, you're already about a year and a half, and if you've done 2 internships ahead of someone that's just coming out of college into an entry-level position. So it's very dynamic. To be successful, I think there's many different avenues. You don't really need a business degree. I've seen people that have teacher degrees. We had a person that had a physics degree that was working on our team. So very dynamic. It's just, you really just need to show that you've gone to college to highlight that you are kind of a critical thinker and a good decision maker. So Jim, I think I touched up on most of the questions.
Yeah, I have a question for you. You've been with one company since, well, not right when you started, but for a majority of your career. Have you had, you've had a great success in having various positions within the company that you're with. Have you faced any challenges, or could you talk to how you've pursued promotions or, kind of upward mobility within your company?
Yeah, some of the challenge is just constantly developing yourself. So a lot of times in the jobs that I was in, I tended to kind of get into a role, develop it, kind of make it run smoothly. And then if it's continuing to run smoothly, I want to challenge myself even further. So I've always wanted to kind of challenge myself, and that's kind of nice in a large company with Deere to do that, where I can move locations and challenge myself in the products that we're building. I can challenge myself in the location that I've moved to. I can also just challenge myself in the work itself, going from supply management in Dubuque to a material flow and a supervisor role in Davenport was almost a 180. The concepts are the same, but the challenging aspect of the different dynamic of a factory, the different people that you're working with, I think that's something that I've wanted to continue. Again, in this role that I'm in now, it's extremely challenging. Just with the people, the products, the people are great. The products that we get are overseas. So managing a supply base that's overseas is a hard challenge for the COVID times, but also just with the freight times that we're in right now, where I come home and you're just drained. It's a lot of work, but at the end of the day, it's good. It's rewarding work. And I think that's something that I've wanted to continue is to challenge myself throughout all these different roles.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to pass it back over to Elizabeth to go on with the rest of our webinar.
Okay, we've got 3 more speakers with us today, but we just have 1 more who's on live. So we are going to finish off our live portion with our final speaker, Erin. Erin, if you want to pop on now, we're going to go ahead and let you go ahead and introduce yourself. She's a little extra special for us because she did used to work for Iowa College Aid. So she's got a special place in our hearts. So Erin, with that short intro, go ahead and introduce yourself and take it away.
Well, I'm sorry if I look like I'm sitting in a cave, but I've tried as much light as I can figure out and it's not working. I'm actually very excited, and I was a little tickled that they asked me to do this. But I am not necessarily a good example of what to do in college. That's what I would say. I graduated 715 years ago from high school, and then I went to college right away. But one thing that was hard to do was we moved from New Jersey to Texas in my senior year. So I'm not sure. And by the way, if I'm having a delay, I'm sorry, but there's some kind of an echo and it's distracting me. So anyway, we moved from New Jersey to Texas, and so it was really difficult to be the new kid from the north. They called me the Yankee. They, had all kinds of fun things to, try to do to me, which was very exciting. But it was a very different environment. You come from New Jersey where, the norm is 6 lanes of traffic going one direction on these interstates, and everybody's like, what? Get out of my way. What do you want? And so I had to kind of ease into what it was like in North Texas. And I went to Midwestern State University, and I did kind of a Donna thing. I changed my major several times, but then I went even farther and I changed my whole university because I said, I'm not doing this. I don't want to stay here. My parents moved here. I didn't pick this. I wanted to go to school somewhere else. So I transferred from Midwestern up to the University of Northern Colorado and spent a very interesting 1.5 years up there because it's hard to be independent and try to figure out what you want to do and be independent and make good decisions. So I always say that, tell my students that I've worked with in the past, you really have to know yourself well. You really have to pay attention to who you are and what you want. I was a vocal major for 5 minutes and realized I didn't really want people to tell me I wasn't a good singer. So then, I moved to more of social science because that was what I was going to do. So I got a bachelor's degree in political science and I was going to go work for the State Department. That was it. that was what was going to happen. But then there was Operation Desert Storm. And it made me very nervous to think about going overseas when there's a war, and I like my mom and dad. So it was a very weird conundrum to try to figure out how to do that. So I went and I took that degree that I had worked very hard on. I did not graduate totally on time, but I overloaded myself the last semester and finished in the summer. So I did technically finish, when I was supposed to. So it was very strange. I went and lived with my parents for a year, and I worked just a regular job, because when you decide you're not going to work for the State Department or the Department of Justice, which I could have, but I needed a break. So I just got a job. And that was enough for me to realize I don't just want a job. I need to do something else. So I went back to graduate school, and I was a hall director, because I had been part of the student affairs and residence life teams at the colleges where I lived and worked and went to school. So this was actually really hard, because I had always said, there's no way I'm doing this. This is what my dad does. Everybody knows my dad. I'm not being Minnie Vance. That's not happening. So, but it did happen. And I did my master's at the University of Nebraska Kearney, and I realized that was my jam. I loved working with students. That couldn't have been a better choice in terms of, if you want a wild job, be an RA and then be a hall director, because you will see stuff that you're like, wow, really? That's the decision you made. And then I had to think back, okay, you were 18 a few years ago, and this is not that crazy. So, it just is, it's an exciting time in your life, because you can do some exploration. And not everybody wants to go to college. I did, but I grew up in a house where I have two parents that have doctoral degrees. I was going to college. It was the way it is. It was what I wanted. So I have a master's degree, and this is a great name, in secondary counseling and college student personnel. Isn't that fancy? But what it ultimately allows me to do is wear a lot of different hats on a campus. I can work in student affairs across the board. I can work in academic affairs. So I went on and was a hall director and worked for residence life staffs at several universities. And in my life, we moved every 5 years. I have never lived anywhere until now for longer than 5 years. So it's very strange. I decided to take some time off to be a mom. That was a very interesting decision too, but I still substitute taught, or I did this and that, because I would drive people who know me would know I would drive you crazy if I didn't have stuff to do. Sometimes it's just not okay. But you learn and you start to evolve as a human being, and you find that there are things that, did I wish sometimes I could be my friends that were, like marketing majors or business majors or computer science majors that were making money, like, wow. Because I'm going to be honest, when you work in education and for nonprofits, which is what I have done now for 25 years, you don't make that. But what you do is you make it up. For me, I have made it up in like soul cash, because it allows me to know I'm making a difference and to see I'm making a difference. And for example, one of the students that I worked with at Gear Up at East High School is a hall director at Iowa State University. And it is a very nice little feather in my cap that she realized that I was working up there on campus, and she said, "You're her husband? She's the best." I'm like, so, I mean, it's cool that 7 years ago, she remembers me from graduating, and that I made an impact on her to move forward. So what I have done in the last 10 or 12 years is all college access until January. And in January, I made the decision, because my kids are old enough now. I have one in college, one going to college next year, and a freshman in high school, that it was okay for me to go back to that collegial environment. And I am an academic advisor at Iowa State. I am advising, and it's funny because John said this and it resonated for me, because I advise one of the newest majors at Iowa State, data science. And when he's talking about business analytics and some of those things, this stuff is for real. There are going to be opportunities if you want to work in nonprofit, if you want to work in education, if you want to work just in business. Everything touches data, and data touches everything. So it's really interesting. And the reason I mention this is because it's actually quite humorous, because people who know me know how much I enjoy math. This is not what Erin knows. Erin knows, you give me history, you give me political science and sociology, I got you. I can argue all day. You ask me about anything other than Algebra 1 stuff, I'm like, oh, no, go see Emily down the hall. She'll be able to help you. So I think that that's the thing. You have to, and it's okay to change. I think the thing that people don't understand is you're not ever locked in. You can change. I still, as old as I am, will, I think, start my PhD, because I really have this unnatural desire for someone to call me Dr. Erin and have it be real. So I think, at some point, but I think for me, the way that I stay young, the way that I stay able to do the work that I do is because I am willing to be educated. And whether it's on things that are issues that are happening in society, or if there's a need for somebody that I can take care of, or whatever those things are. That's why for me, college was so important. And that was why it opened these doors for me that I think, ironically, I think my parents had probably started that process, but because they were both, college professionals, it mattered to them what kids and young adults saw and felt and did. And I have never been able to wander away from that too far, because I love it. So I'm not sure if that was helpful, Jamie, but that's my story and I'm sticking to it.
I think it's an awesome story. I think it's important to know that you can change your career and you can change your major, and both of those it's okay to do. I know when I went to college, I changed my major 4 times and still managed to graduate on time. So if you're not happy with what you've chosen, it's okay to change it and change for something that you love, which is what you ended up finding your happy place. And that's so awesome. I have a question. So what kind of student do you think should get into student affairs? What personality do they typically look for, or do they typically have to get into that position?
Oh, I got to be honest. We need everybody, because you need people like me who will suck people into a group. And then you need people who are a little bit more reserved and can listen and can ingest what they're hearing. And anyone can do the work that I do, but you do have to love working with people. And when you work with people, you work with weirdness that comes with people. So, and I think that's why I've enjoyed Gear Up and the time I spend with Gear Up and Trio and Upward Bound so much, because, they're like, you listen to Nirvana? I was like, dude, I was a teenager too, come on, and it's always interesting to find the commonalities. And I think people who go into student affairs and who want to work with students, we've got to focus more on what makes us similar versus what makes us different. Because then once you make that connection, you can be a little more legit for a kid who may or may not buy into everything you say. And I've had plenty that wanted, to tell me that I was crazy. But I think sometimes that level of being willing to get down in it with people really helps with the connection. Then when I've done nonprofit work, being willing to come down and listen, everything just comes back to listening. I really think any of the work that the people, even John, whose job is so diametrically different than mine, he has to listen. He has to pay attention to what's happening around him, or it just becomes it's really hard to do what we do.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Erin.
You
Jamie,
bet.
any other questions for her?
I don't have any, and I don't see any in our chat either. But thanks.
Perfect.
I always love hearing about your adventures.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. To all of our live panelists and our recorded panelists, we really appreciate you coming on. So thank you so much. Jamie, if you want to move on to our next video one, we'll go ahead and get started with that. Thank you both. Okay, this is Katrina, and she is a physical therapist, and I'm going to go ahead and let her introduce herself and kind of take it away from here. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Katrina Moorland. I'm a physical therapist, and I have been a physical therapist since 2007. I went to undergrad at Coe College in Cedar Rapids. I stayed in Iowa. I was born and raised in Iowa, so I wanted to stay there, and I wanted a small school. When I got there, I knew I wanted to do something medical. I wanted to do something with science. So actually in undergrad, I didn't know where that would go, so I started taking general education classes. At that time, I was also very athletic, and I got into the athletic training field. And so at Coe, I started with the idea that I would major just in athletic training. It takes a lot. Athletic trainers are awesome, and it was super, super busy. And as I kept going through school, I knew I wanted to do more. I wanted to go just further with my education. So fairly last minute, I decided to go around Iowa and some neighboring states, Minnesota, and look at some PT schools. And I got really interested in going on to a physical therapy education. And from there, I got into PT school. I applied to a couple different schools, the University of Iowa and the Mayo Clinic PT school. And I went with the University of Iowa. Backtracking a little bit, going through undergrad to get into PT school, the whole time in undergrad, I knew I liked science. So I continued with science. So when I looked into PT school, I knew that I could get in. You don't really have to have a specific major to get into PT school. You could be anything. I learned at Iowa that some people had psychology, some people had athletic training, some people had biology, chemistry. It was just kind of all over the place. Some people might have had just an English major, but what they do require is prerequisites. So you really have to fill the prerequisites to get into PT school, which is a lot of biology, a lot of chemistry, some physics, calculus, psychology, some social classes. So you have to, really be on a science track to get into PT school, but that doesn't mean that you can't rule out those other majors.
Okay.
So then getting into PT school, I interviewed at Iowa, and that's where I ended up going.
Awesome. And so tell me a little bit about Iowa then and your experience there. And then what your degree was when you graduated?
So going into Iowa, it was intense. It's definitely nerve-wracking trying to get into a doctorate program. At that time, PT school was transitioning from a master's to a doctorate. It was just getting a little bit longer in time. So instead of 2 years, it was 2.5, and some of the doctorate programs were 3 years. PT school has a pretty high application rate and a fairly low acceptance rate. But going in and through PT school and learning a little bit, it wasn't always about, wasn't totally about grades and grade point and academics. It was about having a rounded person, somebody who went through undergrad and just tried a lot of things, was super active. I feel like they accepted that. They just wanted a whole person and someone who used their time well, but then also did fairly well. There were grade point averages, and also to get into PT school, it takes the GRE. So you have to have a GRE score to apply. And then graduating from Iowa, you ended up with a doctorate in physical therapy. At the time, like I said, when I was going to school, that's when it was making the change and everyone was changing from a master's to a doctorate. And a lot of the change was more as a physical therapist, and I currently work in Iowa. A PT can now see somebody off the street. And so we are a direct access state. So someone can come into me for the most part without a referral. So in school, we have to learn a little bit more about differential diagnoses. Is someone who's walking in the door, is it something I can treat? Is it within my scope of practice? Or do I need to send them to somebody else? Maybe it's a physician, maybe it's an orthopedic person, maybe it's neurological. You just have to know the difference of what you can treat and what you cannot treat, since they don't have to be seen from by a doctor first.
Wow, that's interesting. I didn't know that. I always thought you had to get a referral from a doctor. So that's really cool. Is that everywhere in Iowa, or is that your specific program or yours?
That is everywhere in Iowa, and then also a little bit insurance based. So depending on your insurance, like Medicare and Medicaid government insurances, they do require a doctor's referral and pre-authorizations. And then all the other commercial insurances generally don't require any type of referral to be seen by a PT.
Wow, that's really cool. So tell me a little bit about what you do as a physical therapist. So like you're a specific kind of physical therapist. So if you want to talk about that and maybe what you do in your day, I'd love to hear about that a little bit.
Yeah. So I came out and I knew I wanted to be an orthopedic PT. I liked sports from college. I liked athletes, but I also like, we call them our weekend warriors, our active adults, young adults, even older population. I like seeing, the knees, the shoulders, the backs. So I went right into orthopedic PT from the beginning, and that's what I've been the whole time. So we get those people who get hurt, and it's things they chose to do. They have a shoulder problem. We can treat their shoulder. They choose to have a surgery. Other types of PT that I was thinking about while going through PT school would have been like neuro. I was really interested in neuro, but the whole feel of that is different. You have people with, stroke recovery, traumatic brain injuries, spinal cord injuries, things that, they didn't always choose those things, right? It's not the joints. It's just a little bit different. So yeah, we treat a lot of just general aches and pains, joint problems, post-surgical problems, total knees, total hips, pretty much anything that walks in the door with a body problem. And I feel like people utilize this almost more because we're a direct access state. Mm-hmm. They utilize this more easily. They come right in, and then we get to know them. And then, a couple months down the road, when they do it again, they come in again. So we really get a good relationship with our patients. And yeah. That's
really cool. So what about, the people who are going to be watching this are high school students. So if they're in high school and they're some of our underclassmen, so they're freshman, sophomore, junior, what kind of things do they need to do in high school to prepare them for getting into this in college and then beyond? Like what similar classes and things like that? Are there particular grades or activities they should be doing so that they can start taking those steps to get where you are?
Yeah, like I said before, just getting into PT school, obviously that's from college, but even in high school, I feel like working now and looking back and having gone through the interviews and everything, that it's about, you have to like science, okay? You have to like body, you have to like anatomy and biology and all of those things, but I feel like there's no specific classes at that time. You just have to do what you need to do to get into college, because you're going to have to go to a 4-year program and get a bachelor's degree to apply for PT school. But like I said, you have to be, you have to put in the work, right? You have to do the job. You got to get your work done in high school and just be involved. I feel like they like to see people who are involved and upbeat. And as a PT, I feel like you're that way, because our day, we never sit down. We're just seeing patient after patient, and we're always just on the go. And then once I got into college, like I said, I was really interested in biology, in anatomy, in the sciences. And so yeah, yeah, you just have to have that science background, you know, usually, and think about what you're going to do. And it doesn't hurt to go through and look through PT schools, and you have to look and see what each PT school prerequisite is, because they will have a list of those classes that you now have to get and even to apply to PT school. So there's so many credits of biology, there's so many credits of chemistry, there's so many credits of calculus that you have to have done in your bachelor's degree to apply to PT school.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you for that. I have one last question for you. So,
Okay.
a lot of times when you go into programs like PT programs, med school programs, they're going to help you get into your med school, help you get into your career, that kind of a thing. Did the program that you were in help you to get your job, like your first job out of college, or did you have to kind of figure that out on your own? Did you get any assistance or anything like that?
I wouldn't say we got direct assistance, but it really helps. So in our program, the last year is different clinical rotations, and you go to these places, you get to choose them. So they help you choose these clinical rotations, where you want to go, the kind of physical therapy you want.
Elizabeth, it's looking like I'm having some technical difficulties.
No
so
worries.
I cannot load the rest of the video.
Okay. Do we think we probably won't be able to load the other one either?
I'm sorry, my laptop sound was off. Would you like to move on to our next speaker?
Sure, absolutely. Okay, so our final guest speaker today is Megan. She's the senior research analyst with Iowa College Aid and has gotten multiple degrees, some an undergraduate in psychology, her master's in student affairs, and her PhD in public policy and higher education. So without further ado, here is our final guest speaker. And thank you to Katrina. Sorry that it cut off early, but we do really appreciate you coming on.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Megan Oster, and I currently work at Iowa College Aid. And I was just going to talk to you real quickly about my career choice, my current position, and kind of how you get into the type of position that I have. I currently work, like I said, at Iowa College Aid. I am a senior research analyst. And the way that I got into this position is that I actually have a PhD from the University of Michigan in higher education public policy. Prior to that, I earned my bachelor's degree from DePauw University in psychology. That degree really set me up for a research type avenue. So in my psychology degree, I learned a fair amount about research and statistics. I also completed a senior thesis that year that required original research, which was really important. That kind of set me on this path of being interested in doing research to inform basically policy and practice. After my undergraduate degree, I attended Baylor University down in Waco, Texas, in a content area that I was interested in. So I'm a first generation college student, which means that no one in my family prior to me had attended college. And so college was a pretty transformative experience for me. And I wanted to continue to learn about college and what college all was about, and how do we kind of, how do we improve higher education for generations to come? And so I got my master's in higher education and student affairs from Baylor University. I continued to do research while I was there. I did both qualitative and quantitative work. So I did some interviewing and focus groups for the qualitative work. And then I did some quant work on surveys and different things like that of running statistics, right? So there's kind of two different research buckets that typically people fall into. I am much more of a quant individual, so I do a lot more quantitative work than I do qualitative work, but I still do some of that qualitative work. And then after my time at Baylor, I worked in DC for a little bit. I worked at a nonprofit for a little while, and then I got a full-time job at Northern Virginia Community College in their institutional research office. So I basically ran stats and statistics for a specific institutions for that community college. So tracking enrollment, tracking retention rates, graduation rates, different things like that, and trying to improve those metrics at that particular college. After being there for about 2.5 years, I started to apply for my PhD programs, and I was admitted into the University of Michigan's program there. While I was at Michigan, I continued to do research, original research with faculty members, and then proceeded to basically carve out my own areas of interest. So I am particularly interested in higher education finance. So that's why I work at Iowa College Aid. We handle all of the financial aid in the state of Iowa that comes from the state government. I'm also interested, basically broadly interested in how institutions, students, and states fund higher education. And so that's what I do a lot of my research on. I'm also interested in underrepresented populations, so students who we don't typically see on college campuses. How do we get more of them to enroll? And then I'm also just interested overall in college access. How do we get more people to enroll in college? So I have been provided a list of questions, so I'm just going to kind of go through these bullet point wise. For my particular job, what is a job requirement? It's definitely advanced degrees. So at least a master's with a PhD preferred. I handle a lot of my own original research here at Iowa College Aid. So I have to be able to basically supervise my own research. If you're interested in a research path, what courses do you need to take in high school? I would recommend those math courses. Particularly, I actually did not take any AP math, and I was not in advanced math when I was in high school, but I did like math. So in general, if you have a research interest, that's a quantitative research interest, and being able to kind of work with numbers and think about trends, you're going to want to put a lot of emphasis and effort into your math courses, as well as your English courses. So I do a fair amount of writing reports, responding to people's questions, different things like that. So being able to effectively communicate is also really important. So what steps are needed to get into this career path? In general, I kind of outlined that before, but if you're interested in kind of policy work and policy research, it is important that you kind of get experience working with different data sources and different data in general. So if you're interested in that path, my recommendation to you is that you go into your bachelor's degree kind of looking for more quantitative type degrees. So psychology can be that, economics can be that, math can be that, different things like that. Really getting into, working with data, thinking about data, and getting your hands dirty basically with data, and then kind of going through advanced degrees, right? Of being able to get that content knowledge of a particular area. So I'm particularly interested in higher education. There are other people who do research that are interested in health, and individuals who are interested in climate, right? But they're still in the research area. So there's kind of the content area of it. I'm interested in education, particularly higher education, but I have the skills from kind of the math and quant background and the stats background. What is the average salary for US Iowa in general? So starting salary and kind of as you move up and whatnot, in general, policy analysts make anywhere from probably $70,000 to over $100,000. So it just kind of depends. I'm relatively new, so I've been at Iowa College Aid for a year. It takes a while to get all of those degrees, right? And so I'm relatively new, so I'm kind of on the lower end of that right now. But the expectation is that through continued advancement, that pay will continue to increase year after year. I also work, for the state of Iowa, which actually has very good benefits. Very good benefits along with, your traditional healthcare, dental and vision. There's also a very good retirement plan for the state of Iowa. If those are things that you're interested in, you're welcome to shoot me an email after this. But yeah, definitely good benefits that typically come if you work in the state, in a state position. So some of my real life tasks and examples of my work, one thing that's really important to remember when you're in this type of position is that no day is ever the same. So some days I am basically no one bothers me. I do my own research. I'm doing my data analysis. I'm doing things like that. Or I can be sitting in meetings for the majority of the day. It just kind of varies and it depends on what's going on. And honestly, I really like that. I'm the type of person that if I were doing the same thing day after day after day, I would get particularly bored, and I wouldn't like that. So I can do anything from developing a survey to working in quantitative data and, running analyses to writing up a report, right? So it runs the gamut. And there are sometimes when my boss calls me and says, hey, I need you to quickly go out and get some statistics on graduation rates for all of the community colleges in Iowa. I have to drop everything and start looking for that information, right? So it varies, it depends. And honestly, it's one of the things that I really like about my job. Also, as an individual who has an advanced degree, I set my own tasks, right? I am able to say, these are the things that I'm interested in, and these are the things that I want to research, and I'm able to go forth and do those things. Because one, my boss is really great, but also because I do have kind of the expertise and the knowledge to back up what I want to do. So that's important to remember as well. How did I arrive at the decision to pursue this career? Like I mentioned before, I'm a first-generation college student. College was incredibly informative for me, and so I decided to just, one, continue to stay in education. My parents would joke with me about, Megan, are you ever not going to be in college? Finally, I have gotten out of college. I graduated in December, so just a couple months ago with my PhD. And then so now I am finally out, but I just knew that I wanted to continue my education. One thing that I see it as is that it is a buffer against unemployment or decreased employment and different things like that. I know that I can pretty much consistently find a job if I really, really need to, because of the skill sets that I have. So that's one reason why I continued on with my advanced degree. The other thing is that I just really like it. I enjoy doing research. I enjoy writing policy briefs. We're starting to have conversations about different policies because of a policy brief that I wrote. So that's really exciting and something that I really like. Was this my first career choice? Maybe not in general. When I was really young, I wanted to be a paleontologist. For some reason, I wanted to dig in the dirt. But as I grew up and as I got older, this is definitely in the top 5 or 6. At one point, I thought I was going to go and be a faculty member at a university and, teach and do research. But I decided that academia was not for me. And I basically get to do what I want in this job. I get to research, and then I'm actually, I adjunct on the side for the University of North Carolina. So I'm able to kind of make the job that I want, which is really nice. Why is it a good choice to make? Pros and cons of the profession. One, in general, you get to decide what you want to do, which I think is it's a big pro for me. It may not be a pro for other people. So some other people may need to have very strict structure and, discrete tasks. And these are the things that I need to get done. That is not my life. And it's not my work life. My work life is very fluid, and it is very what I make of it, which I really like. Yeah. And then looking back, what you wish we had taken advantage of when you started, networking is really important. If you are kind of going on and getting advanced degrees and whatnot, everybody knows everybody once you kind of get into a very specific field and a very specific niche. So I do wish that I had networked a little bit more, which is important to think about even if you're going into your bachelor's degree and things like that, like getting to know your professors and getting to know other people at the college are really important, because those are the people who may be able to get you a job in a particular area or that they know someone. So I wish I would have networked a little bit more throughout basically my entire academic career. Thankfully, and this goes to the next question about a mentor or an individual who started me on this career path. So I was able to, I have a mentor at the University of Michigan who is also the mentor of my current boss. So that whole networking aspect of it is basically what introduced me to my current boss and was able to secure my current position, because he, told me that it was available, and I applied and obviously qualified and different things like that. But it was something that was definitely helpful. So just remember to make those connections and keep those connections as much as you can, because you never know when somebody's either going to have a job or an opportunity that you may be interested in. And then finally, what other advice do I have if you're interested in this career path? in general, if you're interested in doing any type of research or whatnot, my recommendation is that you just try to get your feet wet as much as possible. You know, ask that professor, you know, if they have a research project going on, if you can help, if there's anything that you can do. More than likely, that's going to be kind of the entry level type tasks of, you know, data cleaning or entering paper surveys that they've done. I did that in undergrad. I entered paper surveys into an Excel spreadsheet as one of my like first research tasks that I had ever done. Am I doing things like that right now? No, I'm not, but that is how I got my foot in the door and was able to start to do the research and start to do kind of the tasks that researchers do. Hopefully we're not doing a lot of that anymore given kind of technological advances, but those are some of the entry-level type tasks that some individuals do, you know. And honestly, if you're interested in research and data and things like that, I would just, you know, keep an eye out as to how, you know, other people use research and data. So you'll see it all the time in journalism, you'll see it in reports, you'll see it across the board. You know, with COVID and all of that, we've all become very, very much more familiar with data and reporting out data and what does that look like. Another career advice or thing that I would plug for this is that data visualization is becoming very, very important. My skill set I don't necessarily have that skill set, but that is a skill set that I wish that I had. And I think that that's a skill set that future employers are going to be looking for as to how can you visualize your data and tell stories about your data, which are pretty important. So yeah, like I said, my name is Megan Oster. I work at Iowa College Aid. If you have any questions for me, you're welcome to reach out to me. You can find me on Iowa College Aid's website, or your current facilitators for this discussion have my email address and they're welcome to provide it to you in the chat. And I hope that everybody has a nice evening and thank you for having me.
Okay. That was a great way to finish off our extra long series that we've been doing. This was our fourth and final webinar part of each that shows each part of our post-secondary education option. So our very, very last webinar in the series is going to be next week. And it's the one that if you've not come yet, that'll be the one to come to, because all of the speakers who have spoken so far over the last 4 weeks will be at that. And it's going to be a large panel where you can come and ask our questions, ask any questions you might have about a particular career or pathway. You can ask to any of those individuals. That one will be a really great one to come to. Otherwise, that's all I've got for you this week. And thank you, Jamie, for getting us started today. And thank you to all our guest speakers. You all have a great rest of your night.